Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, joins me in the GB News studio now. Lovely to see you this morning.
Lovely to see you.
I was just asking Zia Youssef, the chairman of Reform UK, a number of these straight questions, and I can't quite pin down what people are thinking about this Southport killer. We've got complaints by Reform and Nigel Farage that the Prime Minister wasn't honest enough about the fact that this killer was under investigation for terror as well as for the murders and the attempted murders. There seems to be the suggestion that in some way there was a cover-up of the fact that he was looking at Al-Qaeda training manuals. There's some kind of Islamic extremist extent to it. Although if you look at The Sun today, it lists the library of hate that Ruda Cabana was downloading on the internet. It's pamphlets on Nazi Germany, Chechnya, Somalian massacres. What do you think's the nature of the cover-up? Because there's also the suggestion it's been covered up or he was treated differently by the authorities because he was black.
So whenever I see these sorts of comments and the speculation, I always try and put myself in the shoes of the, first of all, the victims. You know, I have two daughters. Yeah. They love Taylor Swift. The whole thing is just horrifying. Yeah. And the more details that have come out from that sentencing. And you think, what motivates someone to have that level of hatred? And clearly, this is an individual who is not okay. But this was somebody who was looking for a reason to be angry. And so many state bodies were involved, whether it was the Prevent, the schools, social services, mental health. It's like everything wrong was happening with this specific individual. The problem that we have now is that it's no longer 1950 or 1980. And when you leave an information vacuum, then all sorts of things start filling that vacuum. And we need to as politicians, ensure that the public know the truth. And when things can't be said, we explain why. What went wrong, in my view, with Keir Starmer is that his initial reaction was to rush to criticize the people who were worried. And yes, of course, some people committed crimes, but he wasn't worried about prejudicing their trials. He was worried about prejudicing this trial. That's where you see the unequal treatment, and that's where we need to be careful. There's still a lot of information to come. I welcome the inquiry which the Prime Minister has said he's going to have. It needs to go further. It also needs to look at the response immediately afterwards. But with social media, we cannot pretend that we can just answer questions like we did in 1950 and 1980. Don't worry, people, we've got it. This is fine. We've got to do better. What
do you think about the black element? I mean, you've campaigned a lot about you wanting society to be colourblind, to not let... I have no evidence for this, but one perhaps gets the impression, was there a period where people were like, we've got to be careful, this is a young black man, this is a man suffering from autism? Do you think that the public inquiry should probe that? Is that the sense you might be getting from some of this?
If there are, it's actually not in this case. But if there are indications that the response was based on treating people differently because of race, it should absolutely look at that. I think it's actually more that there's too much going on, and the state bodies, whether it's Prevent, even the CPS, they're doing so much they can't cope. And we need to look at resourcing, but also whether there's some things that they're doing that they shouldn't be doing. I remember William Shawcross's report that criticised Prevent, and it talked about where the balance of effort was being put. Are people spending a lot of time on the stuff that's actually less likely to go wrong rather than the stuff that's more likely to go wrong? And I think it's a confluence of all of that. I actually think, and this is again this speculation, that mental health is one of those areas that people find tricky to deal with. That this is someone who's suffering from mental health issues. We want to have care in the community. We don't want to immediately institutionalize them. It looks to me like he should probably have been in a mental hospital rather than looked after elsewhere.
Most of the mental hospitals are being closed down in the UK.
But there's still spaces. There are probably people in there who would not do anything as serious as this. And so we need to look across the board at how well we are performing. We set up all these schemes, all these organizations. It's not politicians who run them. And still, people slip through. Now, of course, there'll be many other people who have been caught, which we never hear about. And we mustn't forget that.
Can I also ask you, it's a difficult question, but I'm going to ask it. You've mentioned being a mum. I'm a mum. Should the Southport killers' parents have questions to answer here? You've very much advocated, small state, parental responsibility for their children. We heard Zia Youssef earlier talk about a lack of assimilation of people coming here from abroad. Obviously, the parents are Rwandan. Are there questions for them to answer? And I know that's difficult. They've got into hiding.
It's difficult, but I don't run away from difficult questions. I do think we need to talk about this. This is a family that was given asylum in this country. They were from the ethnic group, I believe, that were the victims of the genocide. He should have been in love with this country. He should have been saying, this is the best country on earth. I say, and the parents, I don't know if they did or not, because that's how I feel. And I didn't even come from, that sort of war-torn asylum background. I came from a middle-class background, and I still see just how special this country is. And I do think that we need to have a broader conversation about integration in this country. It's got to be active, not passive. It didn't matter so much when only a handful of people were coming from nearby countries at a very slow rate. Now, people from all over the place are coming very quickly, and because of technology, they can still keep their heads and their cultures elsewhere. This is dangerous. We need to have a serious conversation about what integration looks like for 2025 and beyond. And it cannot just be what the government should do. Government can't do everything. This is one of the things that frustrates me. The response tends to be, the government should do this, the government should do that. If the government can't do what it's got to do now well, how is it going to do even more well? Society needs to get involved. And that means not just the community neighbours, but parents too.
Nigel Farage has called for Stephen Parkinson, the Director of Public Prosecutions, to resign because of the mismanagement of this case. What do you think?
I have not seen evidence that this is a resignation matter. Let's see what the inquiry says. I don't think it's helpful simply just calling for every single person to resign every time something's gone wrong. The facts of this have not really been looked at carefully. So how do we know who should or who should not resign? And this is the difference between us and other parties. The Conservatives are about constructive opposition. We are under new leadership now. And it's not just about criticising every single thing. We need to understand what's going wrong and be constructive. Constructive opposition, not destructive opposition.
While you mention new leadership, OK, so we've got one Find Out Now survey putting Reform ahead of the Tories on 26 versus your 23 versus Labour's 22. Then we've got this by Lord Ashcroft's polling company. He's a former Tory treasurer. You will be very familiar with Lord Ashcroft.
I do know Lord Ashcroft. He does lots of good work on polling. OK, but is this good work? Who would make the best Prime Minister? Keir Starmer, 31%, Nigel Farage, 21%, Kemi Badenoch, 11%. And then who is acting as the most effective opposition? Kemi Badenoch, 14%, Nigel Farage, 26%, no effective opposition, 27%. That's not a great reflection on you and the Tories, is it? Well, we have to look at where we're starting from. What have we done this year? On rape gangs, we've managed to get the government to move, not to a full inquiry, but now they finally agreed that some inquiries are needed when they said none at all. We've got them to move on that. They're doing disastrous stuff on education. Absolute vandalism on the good work that we have been doing over the last 14 years. On rape gangs, can you take full credit for that? You could say that GB News and Charlie Peters have pushed them to that position. The survivors have. Yes, but that doesn't make you the. That doesn't make you
campaigning.
That doesn't make you the opposition. We were the first to call for a national inquiry, certainly as politicians. That was something I remember because it was my birthday.
Should have happened under the Tories.
Well, we had an inquiry. We had a wide-scale inquiry. I thought that was going to come up with more on this, but it ended up
Alexis J one on child abuse.
Yes, but it ended up, it ended up doing something much broader. And after that, we launched a task force. We found 550 perpetrators that hadn't been found before. That shows that more needed to be done. So this work is ongoing. An election slips in between. Deport those 3 Rochdale abusers. They get stripped of their passport a decade ago, and they're still living there. Most people listening and watching this are tearing their hair out of that kind of stuff. What Camilla, I am tearing my hair out, but we're under new leadership. I wasn't there when that was happening. I did the bits that I could do. I heard you talking to Zia about, the Tavistock and the transgender scandals, for example. Well, I did that. Blaming you as Women Equalities Minister for allowing a situation to happen where we had any question at all over whether there are 2 genders or not. Like, somebody made the point on Twitter. We now have a US president having to say
that there are only two genders.
Indeed.
How did it come to this?
Yes, and this problem has been all over the world. It happened, astronomically, even under Donald Trump. And he is doing what I hope that we will be able to do, which is come back and finish the job.
But it did happen under the Tories.
It happened all over the world.
I know, but
it happened all over the world. We were at the vanguard.
If it happened under left-wing governments, I would understand it. For it to happen under the Conservatives, that we get girls and boys being given puberty blockers, mass mastectomies, and a debate over whether biological sex is mutable or immutable, you're sort of reflecting it, going, how the hell did that happen?
But remember, this was stuff that I was speaking about constantly again and again, and I managed to stop it. Who was it that stopped rapists being put in women's prisons? And this is where we have to look at where society stops and government starts. Many of these things are happening under the radar. We have to do a lot of research. When people went in, they were called transphobes, they were called homophobes. It's very difficult for a lot of people to push through that. I'm not scared of that sort of stuff. I will push through. I will tell the truth and get stuff done. Same thing with postmasters overturning their convictions. I did the tough stuff. And what we're seeing with those numbers is that a lot of people still don't know who I am. They've known Nigel Farage for 20 years. Yeah. He's been leading not just this party, but many other parties. And when people have just kicked you out, then you need time to regroup. What is astonishing is how badly the government is doing. They have a landslide majority, 140. If 100 Labour MPs went home today, they would still win.
Maybe.
That's the situation we're in. And so I've got to make sure that people can see how we're rebuilding trust, that we've acknowledged the mistakes we made, and that we're back on track.
In order to increase your visibility, you could do with being alongside Donald Trump and Elon Musk, arguably.
In what way?
Well, do you want to... You haven't met Donald Trump yet?
No, not yet. I've met the vice president.
Yes, that's right.
And we have a good relationship, yes.
But, I mean, did you look at the inauguration on Monday with a degree of envy?
No, because Priti was there. So we had people on our team there.
Just in terms of him, I appreciate we've got...
And Boris was there as well.
I know. Yes. We've got a completely different system. You can't have a prime minister signing executive orders on day one like Trump was. But do you look upon it and think... This is proper right-wing leadership, and we've got Starmer for the next 4 years.
Well, I think the fact that we have Starmer for the next 4 years does fill me with dread, because I look at what they're doing on the economy. I heard Rachel Reeves on the TV this morning just saying things that
on this show, by the way. We had James Murray on, who couldn't answer
things that are simply not true. And I've been going all around the country. I was in Devon this weekend, and businesses are crying out for help.
Okay.
They need assistance.
Would you be minded to be more Trumpian?
Well, let's see what he does. He signed, executive orders, things like, biological sex, very easy, very obvious. But look at one area where America is leading on energy costs. We have energy 3 times, 4 times as expensive as they do there. That is not sustainable. If we are going to compete, then we need to get serious.
Well, that means scrapping these arbitrary net zero targets.
Well, it means us looking at the plans that we've got in place. We have too many announcements and no plans. That's one of the mistakes we made as government. Labour's doing it. Reform also doing it. Yeah. Too much. The politics across this country is all about talk, but not do.
I tell you what,
so I'm going to work on a proper plan that we can deliver.
I tell you in terms of do, why doesn't the right just coalesce? You're worried about 8 more years of Starmer, not just 4. Why doesn't Reform and the Tories just coalesce?
Because Reform have said that what they want to do is destroy the Conservatives.
I know, but
when
you're
someone
both
says that,
on the same side.
well, I am being the opposition to Labour. What's interesting is that Reform is spending more time talking about me, like Zia, for instance, saying things that are clearly not true about my record on the issue of transgenderism, puberty blockers, etc. They're not interested in solving problems. It's all about taking us down. That is not constructive.
Okay.
We have to do the job that the British public have given us, being a credible opposition. And people need to know what we're about completely. We've just spent the last year looking at Conservatives arguing. I finally brought unity to the party. The idea that we should bring a whole bunch of people who don't like us and then just unify, it's not that straightforward.
All right, Kemi Badenoch. I feel that there's still time. It's a marathon, not a sprint, this, but let's see.